We have to look at housing as a social investment and not just an economic one. But at the same time, I think it's very important to have the perspective that while it's a social investment, it is also of economic interest for the community, for the city, for the country, for Europe, to have people who can live in, people who have access to affordable housing. The cities are not charities. They've realized that to have a competitive city that can attract people and that can house employees, they need that housing. When we have more and more people spending much more than 40% of their income on their housing costs, we have a reduction in purchasing power and a reduction in the amount of money which is going into the local economy. And this is obviously having a negative effect locally, but also at a much broader perspective. We have to look at the social investment, but we don't have to forget the economic arguments for making that social investment in housing. Any conversation about different types of co-housing or cooperative housing is that there should be no obligation for people to share if they don't want. I think we have, in all of the models that we see, there is an option to have community space, but you should also have your own space and have the right to keep your privacy and stay in your own space. And this is sometimes a misunderstanding of a lot of the types of cooperative housing and co-housing, is that you will be forced to do everything together. A key way is to really raise people's awareness of how well it can function in other countries. Because if you're only talking about the theory, it's difficult to convince people. But if they actually learn more about how, for example, housing is run in Denmark. So it's 20% of the housing is run by social housing organizations, and there you have something called a tenants' democracy, where the tenants are joining in and taking part in all the decision making. Any decisions affecting the houses where they live, they take part in the decision making, and it works, and they're happy. Security of tenure, security for tenants are very important, and I think any conversation that we have about smaller community-led projects, we have to keep in mind the bigger picture of housing rights. And this is what we try to do in Housing Europe, is we keep, through our observatory, we keep track of the different housing systems and housing trends throughout the EU. This is extremely important because what we find is that within different member states, there's actually very little knowledge of how it works in other countries. So I think this can really help, this exchange really of information, because often, even though we are in the European Union, when it comes to housing, member states very much see themselves as an island of housing policy, but we really can learn from each other, and that I think it's one of the only ways to convince us to see how it works elsewhere and to exchange expertise. The social housing picture and the social housing definition in Europe is really, really different from country to country, and it's a very complex mix of factors: history, culture, rates of urbanization. So there's no simple way to explain it. We can see countries such as Austria, Denmark, with over 20-30% of affordable limited profit housing organizations, not because they are, let's say, more charitable, or it's basically they've also recognized the economic advantages of seeing housing as an infrastructure. So like we see roads, like we see schools. Currently, because of limits on public spending and austerity since 2008, I think the public pressure is continuously on reducing costs. So I think this argument, this making the economic case for having affordable, healthy, adequate homes, is actually one which we should stress a lot. And I think in countries that want to develop their social housing system, they should look at those countries where where there is a lot of social housing, and look at the maths that's being done, look at the payback.